آزادی بیان.
言论自由
free speech.
The reason I wrote the book, Trigger Warning, is the fear of being offensive, killing free speech, is a kind of call to arms, really. I think we're involved in a free speech war in our society, in which those of us who believe in unfettered free speech are not only in danger of losing, but of actually kind of surrendering without a fight. The whole discussion has become so one-sided, and so much time is spent discussing how we should restrict free speech rather than how we should defend or expand it. You might say, well, if I say I see free speech as under threat, but you might say, well, what else is new? In a sense, free speech is always under threat. Since Athenian democracy voted by 280 to 221 to put Socrates to death for corrupting the youth of Athens by encouraging them to ask heretical questions, free speech has always been under threat, even in the freest and apparently most open societies. But I think the dangers to free speech change, and what my book is really trying to do is identify what's new in terms of the dangers to free speech. That we're not dealing with a situation where we have religious inquisitions hauling us over the coals for blasphemy and in its traditional sense, or we have authoritarian political jackbooted governments stamping on political dissent. Instead, we have a much more insidious culture where ideas are being outlawed, formally and informally, simply because somebody finds them offensive. Somebody finds these ideas and opinions offensive, and as John Stuart Mill pointed out long ago, the more powerful your opponent's arguments are, the more offensive you tend to find them. So I think that's what's changed. We have a culture of conformity where the slogan of the age is, you can't say that. You can't say that. And I think there are three different ways in which this is three different dangers that we're faced with. The first one, and the easiest one to deal with in a way, the most straightforward one to identify at least, is official censorship. We live in a free society, we would tell ourselves, and comparatively speaking, of course, that's true. And yet, in Britain today, on the 800th centenary of the sealing of the original Magna Carta, there are more people being arrested and imprisoned for what they think, say and write than any time since the 18th century. That's quite an astonishing fact, I think. But also, what they're being arrested for is, as I say, offensive opinions. So you have a young man jailed for 4 months in Glasgow, a football supporter, under a piece of legislation passed by the apparently progressive Scottish National Party executive, jailed for singing an offensive football song in the street for 4 months. We have a fundamentalist pastor in Northern Ireland facing up to 6 months in jail for preaching a sermon in which he expressed the honest fundamentalist Christian view that Islam is satanic, and he is facing prosecution and up to 6 months in jail. So that's the official face of censorship we're dealing with. It's not the same as any kind of Cold War political censorship. It's changed. Then there is the more insidious and I think in a way much more dangerous unofficial censorship. The kind of movement of those identity and student activists tend to be leading it. Those kind of people who would once have fought for free speech are now fighting for protection from free speech, for safe spaces in our universities, for the closing of the university mind, in my opinion. And we have the phenomenon of Twitter mobs and online petitions, which kind of pass themselves off as public opinion, and so on. I mean, it's an age that I have described in my book as, contrasting it to the traditional kind of Enlightenment view of free speech, which is identified with Voltaire, although we can have a long discussion on whether he actually said it or not. Voltaire's view that I may hate what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. We now live in the age of what the people I describe in my book as the reverse Voltaires, whose slogan is, I know I'm going to despise what you say, and I'll fight to the end of free speech for my right to stop you saying it. And that's much more the kind of cultural climate we're living in. So we have unofficial censorship to deal with, which is very insidious and dangerous. And the third thing we have as a consequence of this is self-censorship, which is a situation where so many people are worried and unsure what they can or can't say, and are very keen to apologise and withdraw at the first sign of a wagging finger from somebody on the other end of the discussion. And we end up in this culture of you can't say that with the Charlie Hebdo massacre, which I know we look upon it and say these people are the misguided armed representatives of what they see as an ancient Eastern religion, but I think that we could also identify them as the armed extremist wing of a very modern Western culture, which is if you disagree with something, you can close it down. And they've taken that to an armed extreme in their murderous attack on the offices of Charlie Hebdo, the satirical magazine in Paris. Have I got another 2 minutes? Or yeah.
2, yeah.
I think we've forgotten a few very important things about free speech that I want to remind us of. First thing we've forgotten is that free speech is supposed to be free. That means free as a bird, to soar as high as it can and swoop as low as it chooses. Not free as in free-range chicken, to be held in some kind of compound, allowed to scratch around in the dirt and only one executive decision away from the chopping block. And freedom in free speech is an indivisible liberty, not only for those who agree with you, but much more importantly, as an American Supreme Court judge once put it, freedom for the thought that we hate. And the second thing we've forgotten is that free speech is only speech. That opinions and ideas and arguments, however offensive we might find them, should not be seen as criminal offences or physical assaults. And that distinction is something that we're in danger of losing. And when you put them together, free and speech, you have the most powerful expression in the language. The liberty without which everything else that we hold dear in our civilised society would have been pretty much impossible. And the cutting edge of that right to free speech has to be the right to be offensive. Which doesn't mean the right to break wind or insult, shout at people in the street or punch the Pope's mother or anybody else's mother. What the right to be offensive means fundamentally is the right to question everything. To say there are no taboos and everything's got to be open for question and up for debate. And if we hadn't had the right to do that, then from Galileo onwards we would be in a far more backward situation than we find ourselves today. The hard truth about free speech, and I'll end on this, is that in the end it is only those things which society considers extreme, offensive or obnoxious that have to be defended on free speech grounds. The mainstream can look after itself. Nobody ever banned an idea, we might think unfortunately, for being too mundane. Look after the offensive and the mainstream look after itself. Thank you very much.